everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Alana and today you'll be joining me with a book babble on Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth. Now when I see Veronica Roth's name on something, I tend to associate her with YA sort of dystopian or sci-fi, but this is actually something new for her. This is categorized as contemporary fantasy, I believe, and it is not YA. So in this one we follow a group of chosen ones, hence the title, as 10 years after this big event of them defeating the Dark One in their world, new information comes to light and now they have to deal with something further. Basically, when they gather for their 10-year anniversary, they find out that the Darker One's intentions were a lot bigger than what they'd first thought, and there's repercussions for that, and they must band together once more and see what they can do. Now, before I start to get into this review, I will say that the first half of this review will be spoiler free, but the second half will include some spoilers as I want to sort of take a bit of a dive into this story. So I will leave a timestamp just down here in the corner to let you know when those spoilers do start, as well as dropping it in the description down below if you have not yet had a chance to read this, which I highly encourage you to do because this novel was very, very heartfelt. So in this one we begin by following the 5 chosen ones, as they're called. We have Sloane, who is our main protagonist, we have Matt, we have Albie, Ines, and also Esther, as they are gathering once again for the 10-year reunion of the Dark One's defeat. And here is where this book I think already deserves props, and that is because everything is not 100%. So we see in the blurb and also at the start of the novel one of the main themes already coming forward, and that is that Sloane is dealing with PTSD and so are some of the other chosen ones. So this is not your typical story where the big event has happened and everyone lives happily ever after and everyone is fine. Everyone is not fine, and I really appreciated how the book delved into that aspect. And the theme of PTSD and coping mechanisms is a theme that is continued throughout the entire novel. I really do think that Veronica Roth did a very good job with portraying that and discussing it without it seeming like she's trying to put a band-aid on it at all. It was a very raw, heartfelt representation of it, and I just think that she did such a great job handling it. One of the other main themes that I really appreciated in this one is the whole, what do you do after the big event? We see so many stories these days dealing with the big event and building towards this huge climactic point in a series or in a story, and I really appreciated this one for discussing that. Like, what do you do when the only thing that you were good at was defeating a dark magician killing machine? You can't exactly go back to normal life because for the chosen ones they were teenagers when a prophecy picked them out of their ordinary lives and sort of thrust them into their future. And for this book to dive a little bit deeper into that theme and that trope was a refreshing concept. We really see some of the characters fight against not only their fates but also their current positions with where they should be and who they should be, and it was just a really good exploration into that. Before I do get into spoilers, I will just briefly touch upon the genre of this, which I stated earlier was that new age / adult fantasy contemporary sort of genre. And I find this interesting because it seems like a lot of YA authors are taking this step into the more adult sort of setting with their stories. We've seen it with Leigh Bardugo, Jay Kristoff jumps in between all these different genres, also with Sarah J Maas at the moment with Crescent City, and now that Veronica Roth has taken that leap. I think that to box an author just into one genre is very limiting, and for them to try their hand at a whole different range of genres and different writing styles and things like that is very refreshing and also gives their individual books a different feel. For this one, having read it and completed it, it does hover in that new age type bracket for me because we have inserts of memories of when they were teenagers and their battling of the Dark One, but then we are mainly centered in the present day with them being in their 20s or their 30s in some cases. So we definitely have that older voice, but we also have trauma from their teenage self coming into it as well. So reading this, did I think that this is taking a huge step away from YA? Not particularly, but it is that middle ground, and I did enjoy the more mature voices of the characters as well. So that will be it for the spoiler-free section of this video. If you don't want to be spoiled for this book, make sure to pause the video here, go read the book, and then come back and we can discuss it further. Or alternatively, if you like to be spoiled for books, you can just hang around and hang out with me for a little bit longer. So let's kick the spoiler part of this section off by saying I did not see where this was going whatsoever. And I feel like describing this book, you could spoil it very easy for those that haven't read it and don't want to be spoiled for it, because the first thing that comes into my mind is parallel universes and alternate dimensions and different worlds, basically. But if you tell someone that this is a book that contains multiple universes, I feel like you are spoiling them for that big shock factor, because I didn't know when I was reading it, and when I found out that Roth was writing about parallel universes, I had to stop and think about it for a sec, because it was mind-boggling. So after about 100 or so pages, I can't remember exactly where it happens, our remaining chosen ones find themselves transported into another universe where things are sort of like their world, but not entirely. We have a world that has more Roman influences and the full use of magic through siphons, which was a cool element to the story. And we also find out that the Dark One is not dead. Now, for obvious reasons, this really impacts our main character Sloane, who seemed to have a tiny bit of a connection with the Dark One and is still dealing with the PTSD of all of that. And for her to find out that he's still around and alive and thriving is not great for her mental state. So let's start with Sloane and her PTSD. I feel like a lot of people will be talking about her as a character because she is not entirely likable when she is first introduced, and I think that's also due to the medium that we first see her in. We see her through a column article in a magazine where the guy writing about her basically just wants to hate fuck her and degrades her throughout the entire magazine article, but also makes her seem enticing. So our first look of Sloane as a character is that she is a little bit spiky, probably a little bit of a bitch, but still powerful and still a badass woman. When we switch from this point of view to Sloane's own perspective and we see her basically in pieces as she is dealing with a night terror, it really starts to flesh her out as a character already. We see a wounded woman who is trying to hold herself together and try and be normal, even though her situation is not normal whatsoever. And I really liked that insight into her character and also her own personal struggle and journey throughout the book with dealing with her mental health and just coming to terms with what actually happened to her and how that is a very traumatic thing. One thing that I especially loved with her character was there was one moment where she was trying to distinguish between the past and the present, and she notes that the past meant she was barefoot when she was going through her ordeal, and right now in the present she was wearing boots. So that's how she tries to tell herself that she is in the present, she's okay, she has control of her situation. And when I was reading that passage, and it came up a few times, it hurt to read that because it felt so raw, but at the same time, I just feel like Veronica Roth made her character all that more believable. Speaking of characters, Albie, his death hurt me so much because we only see a little bit of him at the start, but he is basically Sloane's crutch and her person that she goes to when she's feeling vulnerable, who she knows will understand because he was also captured by the Dark One. And his death, even though I knew it sort of had to happen for the storyline in order for her to go on her own journey, it hurt because I loved him so much. His end too, with not being able to carry it anymore, and by it I'm referring to the trauma of what happened to these kids, was again very raw and very believable. I think that's one thing that Veronica Roth does very well in this book, and that is to really delve into person's psyche and how they are dealing with their own trauma, and if they are dealing or if they're not coping, and what the results of that can be. Moving on, I do want to talk about the excerpts that are in this book and also the magic system and the world building. I did feel like until it was revealed that there was a parallel universe that we weren't given much in the way of world building slash magical setup. Looking back, I can see that this helps with the payoff of the shock moment of realizing that there is a parallel universe, but reading that first bit, I was very confused, and that's actually what these little cards are as well. It is me saying, what is happening with the magic system? In relation to this, the excerpts in this book, because we have a little bit of a mixed media type going on, you can see that through the different excerpts from different magical books or different acts that are included, and also again in like top secret records and that sort of thing. We also have, like I said at the start, the columns in newspapers. Also there's some really cool Easter eggs with authors' names that have been mashed together. I will let you find those for yourselves because that was really cool to discover. I also point one out in my reading vlog for this, so I'll leave that linked up above, and if you watch it, mention it in the comments what name I found, just as a little cool Easter eggy thing to do. And yes, these excerpts do help with the magic system and the world building because we have different newspaper articles, we have top secret files of the chosen ones and the magical artifacts that they go after. And we also have really fun education excerpts where it's done in this cheery voice that says, magic is cool. We don't know much about it. You don't want to blow up people, but it's good. And yeah, so the tone of the excerpt shifts throughout each different one. And I really think that that helped to break up some of the somber sort of tones and themes throughout this book, with Roth really playing around with her different mediums in this, and I really liked that. As for the climactic point in this novel, this is where my only sort of main criticism for the book comes in, and that is that I think everything wound up too quickly. We had the slow sort of build up to it, and then it got faster, and then we were in the thick of it where Mox isn't actually the Dark One. The Dark One is, what's his name? Nero, I think. And when we find out who Nero actually is, and that he is the one causing the drains because he's skipping between all these different universes, and the amount of chosen ones from other universes that he's pulled across and basically pushed in front of Mox, and Mox wanted to survive so he killed them, it was a lot to find out all at once, but I also enjoyed it. I'm not sure how much more I would have wanted it pulled apart and sort of opened up a little bit more, but it just felt like the pacing for the last 50 odd pages for this book was so fast, and yes, it made me want to read it more because I wanted to know what happened, but then at the end I was sort of left going, and that's it. I don't know if it will be it. I don't know if this is a standalone or a duology or a series or whatever, but either way, how everything pulled together at the end there, that could have just been done tiny bit slower potentially. But overall, that's my only main criticism for this novel. I really liked that Nero was the bad guy in the end. Mox, as well as a character, is very morally grey, but I think he is a product of his situation, and I liked the exploration into that as well. It brings up this debate of how close the chosen ones are to their natural sort of enemy, and how we walk the line between good and evil more closely than what we realize at times. And for Roth to utilize Mox to portray that worked really well, because throughout this novel we see him have one foot in the past and one sort of in the present as he's fighting all these chosen ones that get pitted against him. And even when we do see more of like the good traits in Mox, it's always tinged with the reality of he has killed people and he will do it again to survive. And I like that Roth didn't shy away from showing that with him. I feel like some authors do sort of say, my character's bad because they have to be, and then their character is instantly good at the end of the novel, but I like how Mox is complicated and doesn't just completely flip to good in the traditional sense anyway. And I like how Sloane recognizes that in him and knows that he is that morally grey, in between good and evil type character, but doesn't want to push him to do the right thing all the time. So yeah, if you haven't guessed already, I thoroughly enjoyed the characters in this book. I liked the shock of the parallel universes. The magic system itself felt a little bit like a soft magical system at times, just because we have siphons, but we also have pitch and sound to control the magic through these magical siphon sort of conducts. But at times it was a little bit hard to picture, especially when people had multiple siphons when they weren't meant to. And I don't know, in the way of magical systems, I much preferred the parallel universes aspect to this, because I just felt like I enjoyed seeing a slightly different world to the one we live in, and how this other Earth went in a different direction with its exploration, where we turned to the stars, they turned to the deep. And that was what actually fascinated me with the magic system, of the different direction that humanity took, rather than the way that the siphons worked and how to influence magic. So yeah, those are some of my babbly thoughts on this book. I hope I have encouraged some of you to pick this book up, because I really did enjoy it, and out of all of Veronica Roth's novels, this will be my new favourite. I just liked the more mature tone in it and the really deep dive into the human mind. I appreciated that aspect so very much throughout this book. As always, I will probably finish filming this and realize that I have forgotten to talk about a whole bunch of different subjects, but that's the point of these book babbles. That's why I love to do them, because it's more just to get my thoughts out there and for us to be discussing books. So that will be it for this video. I will leave a link in the description down below to some of my other book babbles and also to the reading vlog that I did do on this book. And I want to know in the comments down below if you'll be picking up this book. If so, why? If not, why not? And I will see you in my next one. Bye!